the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town. Oh, the butcher and the baker and the people on the streets, where do they go? To meet the Mets! Oh, they're hollering and cheering and they're jumping in their seats. Where do they go? To meet the Mets! All the fans are true to the orange and blue, so hurry up and come on down, 'cause we got ourselves a ball club, the Mets of New York town. Give 'em a yell! Give 'em a hand! And let 'em know you're rooting in the stand. Come on and meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets of New York town, of New York town.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to Talkin Mets. Here, Rob, with another Mets Spring Training Talk live right here on the channel. Hopefully everybody is doing okay on this Sunday, March 10th. 18 days away until opening day on March 28th against the Milwaukee Brewers. And the Mets did have a game today against the Detroit Tigers as they lost 3-2 to the Tigers. But there's some players that we actually seen today that is nice to see continuing to do well, and some guys that are trying to win a job that did perform well today. So we're going to start with Adrian Hauser, the guy in the back end of our rotation. Obviously, the Mets traded for him from the Brewers along with Tyrone Taylor, and he had a day, 3 1/3 innings, 5 strikeouts, no runs, no hits, no walks. Now, what's eye-opening here is that Adrian Hauser is not a strikeout pitcher. He shook out 5 guys in 3 1/3 innings, but it is nice to see that he has that capability. And again, this the Detroit Tigers without the Javi Baez's of the world. Again, you're not going to go crazy with crazy spring numbers, but a guy that I keep on telling you about is about Adrian Hauser, how everybody laughed at the trade. Oh, it's another one of those back-end guys that don't really matter. Those guys matter just as much as in the guys at the top of the rotation. A guy that can go out there every 5th day and give you consistent 5 or 6 innings, 3 or 4 runs is a guy that is consistent, that is out there every 5th day, and that consistency matters. And again, he'll throw you a game like today. Now, if he would have went 5 innings today, would he have gave up a run or 2? Possibly. But if you're asking your 4th to 5th starter to give you 5 or 6 innings, 2, 3, 4 runs, that's a win in my book, because in a situation where your offense, and a lot of people believe this offense could be pretty good, considering the fact that Marte has looked healthy, that Nimmo is looking like a guy that could be possibly out of the leadoff spot, as we'll get to that in a little bit. But I think this lineup is good enough to score 4.5 to 5 runs per ball game. And if you keep your opponent under 4 runs, you have a pretty good chance of winning that game. And the problem with the Mets last year, they were giving up between 5.5 and 7 runs per ball game last year. And unless you're a team that is like the Braves offense that can score 6 or 7 runs per ball game, it's rare that you're going to win a lot of ball games in Major League Baseball. And when you're a slightly above average team and in the top 10 of runs per game, you should be able to win a lot more ball games when you score about 4.5 to 5 runs per game. And that's where the Mets have been. Even last year, when they struggled offensively, they were still scoring around 4 to 4.5 runs per game. The problem was they were giving up 5 to 7 runs per ball game on average. And it's very hard for an offense to continue that 5 to 6 run a game pace when your pitchers have been giving up that many runs. So it is nice to see that Adrian Hauser is still showing why consistency and solid performances and quality starts matter in Major League Baseball. The majority of these games now, the majority of the starts in Major League Baseball is a quality start, right? A 5 inning, 2 to 3 runs. That's usually where a quality start lies nowadays in Major League Baseball. You know, a quality start used to be at least 6 innings, 1 run, 2 runs. Now it's 2 to 3 runs for 5 innings. And that's something that you can get a lot often than not for Adrian Hauser. Excuse me. Ooh, sorry about that. Sorry about that. A little cold. All right, so that's good news. Adrian Hauser is probably one of the guys that I was really looking forward to when they got him from the Brewers because, again, the Mets have lacked consistency from their starting pitcher. Even in the 101-win season when Scherzer went down, DeGrom didn't pitch the first half of the season. And you had Chris Bassett as your consistent pitcher. Nobody considered him an ace, but he was out there every fifth day, giving you above average starts, if not better. And I'm not saying Adrian Hauser is going to pitch like Chris Bassett, but the important thing was that you knew every 5th day Chris Bassett was going to take the ball and give your team a chance to win and beyond, right? Adrian Hauser, now he might not go beyond a lot, but he'll give you that consistent every 5th day start where you say, I trust him going on the mound, where I give my team a chance to win. You know, 2022, 2023, the pitchers really did not do that, right? Besides Chris Bassett hold the fort down when there was no DeGrom and no Scherzer for 7 weeks out of the season and DeGrom for a first half of the season. You have to remember stuff like that. And you remember that you got the quality starts from Tyler McGill and David Peterson. And, you know, another pitcher that are showing a lot of eyes right now, and if you pay attention to what the Mets are setting up every 5th day with these pitchers, if you do the math, and I did it yesterday, Luis Severino is scheduled, if he does continue to pitch every 5th day, for opening day on March 28th. Again, that can change with off days. That can change with rainouts. The Mets have not announced an opening day starter yet, which is kind of weird that we're a little over 2 weeks away and we really haven't had any, I guess, inkling of who is going to be the opening day starter, which is just a sign of, well, Kodai Senga's not here. And there's a lot of choices you can make. You know, a lot of people think Tyler McGill could be that guy again for the 3rd straight year. Some people think that it should be Luis Severino, give him that vote of confidence, you know, not being in the Bronx anymore and now is in Flushing, Queens. That's something to think about as well. Could it be the veteran in Jose Quintana? There's a lot of options there, and I don't care which one they choose, to be honest with you. Tyler McGill, been one of the best pitchers in Mets camp, who has been fighting for a rotation job ever since Senga went out of the rotation with the injury. Quintana is the veteran, so that could be the obvious choice. And Luis Severino, if he continues to pitch well over the next 2 weeks, he might get – it's looking like he's going to get 2 more starts before opening day. So it's really possible that the way it's setting up right now – now, again, things can change. Rainouts, days off, the way they might give a guy an extra day of rest or 2. Severino is lined up for the opening day start. Now, everybody's going to start looking like, oh, Carlos Mendoza, the former Yankee, Luis Severino, the former Yankee, and blah, 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 and stuff like that. But that's not a bad idea before we get into our major topics. It's not a bad idea. And people are going to be like, oh, why do you want a Yankee to start on, a former Yankee to start on open day? I don't care. If Severino goes out and pitches 2 or 3 5 ERA this season, is anybody going to care that he was a former Yankee? No. It doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter, right? People like Starlin Marte, right? He's not a came from the Mets farm system, right? People like Bader, right? He wasn't necessarily a Yankee long term. He was more of a Cardinal, right? So I don't really care where you come from. The fact of the matter is, you're wearing the orange and blue. You got the Mets across your chest. Just do your job. And the thing with Severino, I think, is more about confidence and repeating his delivery. And I think the Mets might be thinking, and I don't think this is not a bad idea, that if you give him the opening day nod, it lets Severino know that the team believes in him and his stuff and his talent, regardless of what he did in years past. And I talked about last year how horrible the Yankees used him and the way they treated him on the IL. And I think they did a terrible job with Luis Severino. But I think you can give a little bit of confidence to him, and I think that's what he needs. I think he needs a little push in the back and a little bit of confidence from the organization. Now, I'm not saying that Luis Severino is going to be pitched like an ace and pitch you a 2.5 ERA. I'm not saying that. But for a guy who is crucial to this rotation this season, at least for the first half, who is going to be in the middle of this rotation, it's important to get Luis Severino going in the right direction very early, because I think if he feels confident, I think his stuff is going to play. He's got nasty stuff. He's always had a great arm. Confidence is probably more the problem than the actual stuff, because when he loses that confidence, he doesn't believe in himself and his abilities. And I think that's where he gets lost in his head, and I think that's where the mechanics start to mess up. And as the Mets have said many times, they believe they figured out the situation with him tipping pitches, which was easily figured out apparently from the Mets side, that he was tipping the pitches, and that was a huge problem with Luis Severino. But as of right now, if you look at the every fifth day situation, Luis Severino is setting up for opening day. Again, that can change. But we'll see what happens. And again, I would be okay with either a Tyler McGill, Jose Quintana, Luis Severino opening day start. I think McGill and Severino has pitched really well. Again, only we're 2 weeks away from opening day, so a lot can happen. Jose Quintana, the veteran, I never complain about giving a veteran an opening day start. But listen, this rotation right now, besides Senga, all you want to see right now is everybody just getting into form, stretching out, and remaining healthy on opening day, right? If you can go in, all right, granted, without Senga, but if you can go in with McGill, Quintana, Sevy, Minaya, Hauser, as Mike just said, I'm not too worried about a rotation. Again, would you want Senga here? Absolutely. Senga would help this rotation 100%, right? A Jordan Montgomery would help it, right? But let's focus on the guys that are here, right? Minaya looked good the other day. Hauser has looked good all spring. Sevy has looked good in his 2 starts. McGill has looked good in his 3 starts. And it's continuing to see that you get guys, and you don't need 2 or 3 guys at the top of your rotation that are just outstanding. You need guys to give you quality starts. Quality starts goes a long way in Major League Baseball now. I continue to bring back the Phillies rotation last year, as everybody just loves the Phillies, and the Phillies are so good. Their best pitcher last year, their best pitcher with the best ERA was 3.5, and that was Zach Wheeler. If I'm not mistaken, I think he had a 3.58 ERA. So if you can get that from the majority of your starters, and everybody else in that rotation, in the Phillies rotation, was well above 4. So this team that everybody seems to love from the Phillies side didn't have a pitcher that had under a 3.5 ERA. Yet people who don't think Senga is an ace pitch to an under 3 ERA when he comes back. So if you get most of your guys pitching in the high 3s, low 4s, I would say from anywhere from a 3.7 to a 4.5, Because if you pitch 5 or 6 innings, if you really do the math and you break down the ERA, that's about 3 runs every 5.3 innings. That's more than a winnable game. Now, again, that is the bullpen situation when you got to pitch them about 3 innings or so, 4 innings or so. But that's something that I'm not too concerned about, even though we will get into guys like Lopez and Fujinami, which I'm a little concerned about. But again, they just started pitching. I think Fujinami was his second game today, and Lopez, I think this was his second game as well, a third game. So there's a lot to look into when it comes to that. Diekman has looked good. There's a lot of guys that that like Ottavino has looked okay in spring. Again, walks the world, but finds a way to get out of it every single time, which is amazing to me. But he does it. Diaz is going to be making his debut on Monday. We'll talk more about that. So, well, Mike, I don't know if you heard about Joey Lucchesi, but there's been a lot of talk around camp that Joey Lucchesi he came into camp out of shape. He wasn't really in the best shape to start on a pitch regimen right away, like most of the pitchers were. So that's why he's very behind. And then when he was about to pitch, it rained. So Joey Lucchesi is his own worst enemy, right? He had clearly a good shot of making one of the rotation spots after Senga went down. And he was going to be fighting it out for probably with Tyler McGill. But because Joey Lucchesi came in out of shape, not ready to pitch, took him a while to get his arm ready to go. And now he's very, very far behind. And there's a little over 2 weeks until opening day. So Joey Lucchesi is his own worst enemy. And that's the reason, unfortunately. But you know what? One man's failure is the next man's opportunity, right? And that's where Tyler McGill comes in. And you know what? Tyler McGill has been outstanding. And again, I'm not going crazy with the numbers, but what I like to see in spring training is guys find their control. Tyler McGill has been really good control-wise, which was a real problem last year for him. And why he was so good in 2022 was because he wasn't walking batters. He was letting guys – he was, striking out guys out with that high fastball in 2022. He was, wasn't scared of contact. It seemed like last year he was scared of contact, walked a ton of guys, and it just was a tumbling effect that made him a very inconsistent pitcher last year, and then with the injury as well. So I think Tyler McGill deserves it. Again, there's still 2.5 weeks to go. A lot can happen since then. I can really see McGill being that guy in the rotation, which I'm fine with. Again, Severino is slotting every 5th day, right on time for opening day. Again, that can change, but we'll see. Ricardo, I wouldn't say I'm pretty I'm pretty confident, and that's okay if you are. That's your opinion. I wouldn't say I'm pretty confident, but there's no reason to think that this rotation can't be a quality rotation. And I'm not, and again, you don't need to be the best rotation in baseball to make a run at a playoff spot. You really don't. Again, I keep on going back to the Phillies because it's a perfect example, right? They're a team that, they have a ton of offensive power and they score a ton of runs, but they only scored a little over 5 runs per ball game. And when your rotation is giving up close to 4.5 runs per ball game, well, there's not that much of an error, much of a difference. And it's kind of like, it could have went either way. So if, again, your offense score 4.5, 5 runs per game, which the Mets have done the last 2 seasons, and there's no reason why a similar lineup can't do similar, even with a couple of off seasons by a couple of core guys on our lineup last year. They still scored that many runs per game. No reason to think they can't do that at least, if not more. So, again, I continue to say, if the majority of your guys give you between 3.5, I wouldn't even go that far. Let's go to 3.7 ERA to a 4.5 ERA. I think that is perfectly fine, considering the fact that look at the rotations around the league. Like, I mean, how many rotations do you really trust, right? Just looking at the National League, there's not a lot of rotations that you say, wow, I'm scared to face that rotation, right? You can just look at the NL East, right? The Phillies rotation, right? After Wheeler, what's really there to scare you, right? After Strider for the Braves, what are you really afraid of? And again, I'm not saying the Mets are at the Braves level, but when you really look at the pitchers after you get past their first starter, Max Fried, who's had injuries the last few seasons and has struggled, is a guy that I don't even think the Braves know what they're getting from him. And that's the other thing as well. Yeah, but easy. I'm so sick of Aaron Nola. All right. Everybody keeps on talking about Aaron Nola like he was a guy. I fought 2 years ago when I first started this channel about Aaron Nola not being an ace. And the Phillies fans continue to kill me about that. Aaron Nola is not as good as a pitcher as you actually think. Again, if you watch enough Phillies games, Aaron Nola struggles a lot more than he provides quality starts. If you look at a lot of his starts, right? He'll have his gem every now and then, but he's a guy that pitches like a number 3 at best, and occasionally will give you an ace performance. Now, he's been good in the playoffs for the Phillies, which is a reason why I wouldn't have mind the Mets trying to go after him earlier in the offseason before he signed back with the Phillies. But Aaron, and I'm not saying the Mets don't have a number 2, quote unquote, as Aaron Nola. But if you really look at his numbers, he really didn't pitch much better than Jose Quintana when he came back at the end of the year. Like, Jose Quintana could probably pitch better than Aaron Nola. Now, you won't probably get the gems every now and then like Aaron Nola gives. But let's not act like Aaron Nola has been pitching to a 3 ERA here over the last couple of seasons, because he has not. He didn't pitch well last year, and he got a pretty damn good deal for a guy who didn't pitch well and hasn't really pitched well. He got that contract based off his playoff performances, which I'm fine with. But again, he went back to the Phillies. So, like, I'm just gonna pull up his numbers. Just give me a second. Excuse me. Give me a second, guys. I'm gonna just pull it up. All right. So Aaron Nola last year, 4.46 ERA, right? 4.46 ERA in how many starts? Let's see. In 32 starts. So he pitched every 5th day, which was consistent. That's important. I always believe so. But he pitched to a 4.46 ERA, right? And if you really look at 2022, he had a good season, 3.25. But 2021, he had a 4.63. So the last couple of seasons, average at best. Now he pitched 32 starts each of the last 3 seasons, which is nice. But again, he pitched a ton of innings, which is good. And again, a 4.46, you're talking about Adrian Hauser. Adrian Hauser had that ERA last year. You know what I'm saying? So, like, a guy that's just got, what did he get, $163 million is pitching like Adrian Hauser, who is the Mets' 5th starter. So if you really look at the numbers, it's not that much better than Adrian Hauser. And I'm not saying he's Adrian Hauser. That's not fair to Aaron Nola. He's been much better than that. But look, last year, Adrian Hauser, 4.12 ERA. So he pitched better than Aaron Nola last year, right? He pitched, remember, he pitched in the bullpen as well a little bit. So he pitched 21 games last year, Adrian Hauser. He missed a few starts with a little bit of an injury, but he averages 26 to 28 starts per year, right? Because most of the years that he actually pitched, not in the bullpen, he pitched consistently every 5th day. So it's important to realize that the Philadelphia Phillies' second best pitcher in their rotation pitched to a 4.46 ERA. That was not better than Adrian Hauser. That is probably not better than what is Sean Manaea, even though he was pitched in the bullpen last year a little bit. But when he came back, he pitched to a little over a 4 ERA. So, and again, I'm not saying these guys are better or have better stuff than Aaron Nola. But if you just look at the stats last year, They pitched better than him, right? And then you go down around the later part of their rotation. How much better is it? It gets worse. Taijuan Walker pitched your near 5 ERA, right? Suarez was a high 4 ERA. Like, these are not guys that are, that are running down leagues and are being one of the best rotations in baseball. They're not. And if you remember last year when we played the Phillies, there was a lot of close games until the Mets decided to not play defense and their pitching give up a ton of runs. The Mets were in a lot of those ball games against the Phillies that could have changed the whole circumference of June, to be honest. We played the Phillies a lot in June. So it goes back to the same thing. The Phillies had pitchers that went out there, most of them, every fifth day, and give them, if not a quality start just under a quality start. So you got teams in your division that there's not one rotation that you could say that, wow, we got to be careful with this rotation. Because, again, the Braves, after Strider, a lot of question marks. The Phillies, with Zach Wheeler, after that, you can't tell me that Aaron Nola is going to pitch to a 3 ERA when the last 3 seasons he did that once out of the 3 and had a mid-4 ERA the last 2 out of 3 seasons. I agree, Explosive. Their bullpen's very good. But, again, bullpens are fickle. Just because they had a good bullpen last year doesn't mean it's going to be as good as this year. And their bullpen saved their ass last year because if their bullpen wasn't elite and they weren't good, they had to be great. If their bullpen wasn't great, they would have never had the 90-win season that they had. They would have probably lost a lot more of those games and probably would have had an 84, 85-win season. So they couldn't count on their rotation. They counted on their bullpen a lot, and they counted on hitting a ton of home runs. And as, again, 2 years in a row, once they stopped hitting home runs, their offense was dormant. And that's the other thing. And the Phillies didn't do anything. They brought back Aaron Nola. They didn't do much. So let's see. Why do they leave guy on base? I see people talking about 06. But yeah, after that Chavez catch, I thought we were going to win. That's unfortunate. Yeah, absolutely. If it wasn't for a bad throw by Duda, if it wasn't for the opening game 1, first pitch, if Cespedes would have actually ran to the gap and caught the ball instead of pulling up, because the ball barely hit the warning track, that ball would have been caught. They would have went to a quick 1-0 lead. And who knows? Camille didn't blow the game in game 1. A lot of things could have happened, right? Murphy with the bad error, Duda with the bad error. There's a lot of things where, 1 or 2 things happen. Who knows? The Mets would have had a 2015 World Series that was very unexpected. And that's another thing. A very unexpected run to the World Series. Because just like this year, 2015 was a transition year. A year where 2016 was the year where the Mets were really going to go after it, right? That was the whole thing. A lot of young arms coming up through the rotation, right? A couple of guys in our farm system ready to come up to help the lineup, help the organization. 2016 was supposed to be the year. Go back, if you watch 5 Days in Flushing, Sandy Alderson talked about it, right? The players talked about it. If you look at when they talked to them in spring, if you go back last year, in 2015, prior to the season, during the spring training, there wasn't a lot of talk about a team like the Mets making the playoffs in 2015. 2016 was supposed to be the year where they took that next step. Well, it's very similar to what 2024 is being talked about, right? 2025 is supposed to be the year. Guys are coming up from the farm. Mets are going to spend a ton of money. That was supposed to be 2016. 2015 is very similar conversations like we're having in 2024's offseason. So we'll see. All right, so let's get to the topics now. Hauser shines in his start. 3 1/3, 5 strikeouts, no runs, no walks. Another solid start for Adrian Hauser. Fujinami, who a lot of people wanted and like, struggled today. 3 hits, couple of runs, a walk. Didn't really have a good performance. It's only second outing of the year of spring, so I'm not going to go crazy. He is a guy that has struggled with control, has great stuff. Throwing around a little above mid 90s, though 96, 97. A guy that has to warm himself up to get up to that 100. But again, if you can harness that miles per hour, 1 or 2 miles an hour to help with control, I'd rather him throw 98 than worry about throwing 102, 103 with no control. So Fujinami is a guy that we have to look at. Jorge Lopez hasn't looked good this spring either, even though he only had a couple of start outings this spring as well. A guy, these are 2 guys that a lot of people are thinking that should be in the back end of the bullpen. But you can't have a guy that's a bridge to Diaz, that is dangerously wild with their pitches and throw a ton of walks. You can't have that situation like they did last year where Robinson was excellent, but the problem was getting to Robinson with the lead. That was the problem. When Robinson was able to get the lead, he was outstanding. You can't have a bridge guy being so inconsistent because you want to give the lead to Diaz. Mike, I think you're 100% off. The offense is, I don't know what people look at when it comes to this offense. I truly don't. Like, I'm not saying that it's going to be the top of the league. But this offense has been scoring 4.5 runs per ball game consistently. And that was even with an off season a season last year where 3 out of your 4 guys had down seasons. McNeil hit well under average. Alonso, average-wise, was not very good. He had the power on the RBIs. Lindor came on late with his average, but he was struggling for half of the year. Like, you had a lot of guys that had down seasons in areas of their offensive categories that was troubling, right? Jeff McNeil, usually when he has a bad year, has a good year the following year, right? We need McNeil to bat 300. We need Alonso to get that average back up to his career average around 245, 250 with his 40-plus home runs and 100 RBIs. We need Francisco Lindor to bat 240, 250 with his 25 to 30 home runs and his 95 to 100 RBIs. We need Nimmo, if he can get that average up to where he did last year, around 270-something, 20 home runs, 20-plus home runs, and do what Nimmo does. This offense is fine. This offense is not as bad as people think. And if Marte is healthy, which he seems like he's healthy, he's running like a gazelle in the outfield, right? Last year, it seemed like Marte wasn't going 100% last year, running for balls, was pulling up on balls. He's going after it in spring training. If Marte is healthy, Marte is a hitter. He's always has been a hitter, right? I'm not saying he's going to hit 30 home runs, but he's a guy that can bat 275, 280, and knock in 15 to 20 home runs. And he's a guy that stole 26 bases in an injury-plagued season who played a half a season. If Marte's healthy, he can easily steal 40 bases. Yeah, but you're talking about Bader batting ninth. Can you name me a guy that bats ninth on another team that you could say, oh, look at that offensive juggernaut? No. Marte is not a shell of himself. If you watch him in spring, he's been outstanding. Now, third base is a problem, 100%. Now, I'm more concerned about the defensive side of third base than the offensive side of third base. Because if you got Marte, and what nobody likes to bring up, which is amazing to me, not one person in this chat, and including myself, I'm to blame as well, has brought up Francisco Alvarez, who is having a good spring, is a guy that can easily be a 25 to 30 home run guy. Now, you want to get that average up. You would love for him to bat 230, 240 with 25 to 30 home runs, which can make a lot of difference with this offense. But we don't need Marte to be a guy that is a guy that needs to hit 20 plus home runs. But Marte, if healthy, you see his bat speed is there. Remember, he had a core issue last year. He had a double hernia surgery, sports hernia surgery last year in the offseason. So that bat speed, that core wasn't really right. He seemed like he came back a little bit too quickly. Marte looks healthy. And I don't think you need a Marte of 2022. Now, can he get similar to that, close to that? I'll take that. Because anything close to 2022 Marte is going to be a lot of help to this lineup in 2024. Well, Joel, I don't think it matters with Alvarez, to be honest with you. And I wanted to put up a thing. I didn't put this poll up, but I did put a poll up the other day on my community page that there's been a lot of talk about Brandon Nimmo leadoff spot. And I know I'm going back and forth with different topics here. Joel, yeah, okay, that's fine. I think you can get that from Marte. You know, give him a day off every now and then. We have more than enough guys on the bench that can fill in. You got a guy that can play 2 or 3 times a week in Tyrone Taylor. You know, Marte's not going to play 6 days a week. He'll probably play 5 days a week. And if that keeps him, if that keeps him healthy to play 140 to 145 games, completely fine with. I'm okay with that 100%. And I know Mike talked about Bader, but Bader's your number guy. Mike, you don't win with a light hitting right fielder and a light hitting left center fielder. Yeah, true. But Marte, healthy, is not a light hitting right fielder. Center field, fine. But if you look at Bader when healthy, he's okay. But again, you're talking about your number 9 hitter. You're not talking about, and again, you get a little crazy about, light hitting right fielder, light hitting center fielder. But how many guys have a big hitting shortstop and a big hitting first baseman and a big hitting catcher and a big hitting left fielder? Right? You didn't mention those though. So, we forget about them, but you're going to bring up the light hit inside, which Marte is not a light hitter. Marte was hurt last year. There's nothing you can do about that. If Marte is healthy, he's going to hit probably to the back of his baseball card. We don't need 2022 Marte. It'd be great if we get 2022 Marte. But if you get a 270 average Marte who plays every 5th day and give him a couple of days off a week, he can play 135 to 140 games and be fine. Joel, why can't Marte bat 278, 19 home runs, 81 RBIs? If he plays 135 to 140 games, he can do that because he's a pure hitter. And he's a guy last year, even injured, that stole 26 stolen bases last year, who can easily steal 40 with the way the new rules are. Now, I'm not telling you that this offense is going to be a juggernaut. But this team offensively is not getting enough credit, or at least enough thought about being a pretty good offensive team. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be at the Braves level or the Dodgers level or the Yankees offensive level. But again, you don't need that. Would you like that? Absolutely. Of course. I love to have Alonso hit 50 home runs and 130 RBIs batting 250. I love for Lindor to hit a 30 and 100 batting 250. I'd love for Brandon Nimmo to bat his 275, hit 20 plus home runs, 75 RBIs. I love Alvarez to hit 30 home runs, which he can do. Of course. But if these guys just play at least the core to the back of their baseball cards, because that was the big problem last year, specifically in June, they're still good enough to win more ball games than people think. Last year, nothing went right and they won 75 games. Nothing. The offense was terrible. The rotation was terrible. The bullpen was terrible. There was not one part of this, one part of the game. Rotation, offense, bullpen. That was even consistent enough to have a pulse after May. If 2 of the 3 are consistent, you're going to be right in the mix for a wild card. I am not talking about the division because that's a lack of respect given to the Braves. But as I said, time and time again, the fact of the matter is, after the top 3 teams in baseball, the Braves, the Dodgers, and pick a team in the Central that's going to win the Central. You can pick the Cardinals, you can pick the Brewers, you can pick the Cubs, whoever. After those 3 teams, everybody is in the same ball game. When the Mets, who were dying at the trade deadline, were only 6 games out of a wild card spot, and everybody and their mother was 6 games or less, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, the Cubs, right? All those teams that were 500 at best, couple of games over, are the teams that are going to be similar. They're not much better. It's not like somebody got drastically better. The Cubs, did they get drastically better? The Diamondbacks, who only won 84 games, did they really get better? Are they going to take that next step? Can they? Absolutely they can. But now there's a target on their back. Everybody that plays them is not going to take them lightly anymore, right? We talked about that with the Mets going into 2023. Oh, the Mets kind of, bulldozed over people. A lot of teams weren't taking them seriously until later in the year. And then 2023, the Mets had a target on their back. Totally different story, right? The Mets could be better than everybody in the Central, right? Do you expect anybody in the Central to win more than 85, 86 games? Maybe. Right? Besides the Braves and the Dodgers, who are going to probably win north of 95 games, other than that, where are you seeing a lot of 90-win teams, 90-plus win teams? Now, the Phillies barely did it last year, that won 90 games. But they also had a terrible Mets team, a Marlins team that was a fringe playoff team, but weren't very good. They were good. They were solid. They made the playoffs. And the Nationals that were terrible. So the Phillies had a lot of teams that they can beat up on in the Mets and the Nationals last year. The Marlins, who are not going to have their main starting pitcher because he's out, they didn't really do nothing. So are they going to be a good team? They can be a pesky team, absolutely. So we're not really looking here of a team that, and I'm sorry, I don't think the Phillies are as good as people say they are. Like, there was a lot of games last year. I can count probably about 5 or 6 games last year where the Mets blew games late in the year because of their terrible bullpen, their terrible defense, which really cost a lot of those games against the Phillies, specifically in June. And I don't believe the Phillies are very good. I think they're a team that are another fringe wildcard team. I think they benefited from a bad National League. And that's the other problem. When you didn't have to worry about the Mets, basically after the middle of May, well, kind of easy to just stroll yourself into a National League, and they were the second wildcard team. Excuse me, the first wildcard team. So, we keep on looking like they were a juggernaut when they really weren't that good. Now, could they be better this year? Sure, of course they can. I expect Wheeler to be pretty good. I think better than last year, but who knows? Aaron Nola, I don't trust as their number 2. I don't trust him. 2 out of the last 3 years, he had over 4.5 ERA. So, their bullpen was good, but we talk about bullpens all the time. Bullpens could be good one year, and the next year, they're not that good. Easy, the Phillies are mentally tougher than the Mets. Yeah, I could say that. Absolutely. But you could talk about them being mentally soft as well, because when they got hit in the mouth in the playoffs, they never recovered. Right? But they made the playoffs, so I guess that counts for something. But again, in 2022, you weren't talking about the Phillies being mentally tough. Right? You talked about 2023, where they were mentally tough. 2022, they got hot at the right time. Right? It was a team that snuck into the wild card, the last wild card, and got hot at the right time, where I guarantee you teams didn't take them seriously until the NLCS. And they faced the Padres team that was mediocre at best. Right? They lost to an Arizona Diamondbacks team in game 6 and 7 at home. So how mentally tough are they? And I'm sorry. I think the Mets, it's easy to bully a Mets team that was down in the dumps in early June. The Phillies weren't mentally tougher in 2022. That's completely wrong. Completely wrong. They got hot the last month of the season. That was it. The Mets dominated them. So mentally tough that was not true at all in 2022. They went on a run, just like the Diamondbacks went on a run. You say the Diamondbacks are mentally tough? If the Diamondbacks are mentally tough, that means the Phillies are mentally soft. Right? They're a team that relies on home runs. When they stopped hitting home runs, just like in Game 6 and Game 7 of the NLCS last year, they struggled because they couldn't put hits together. That's how they scored the majority of their runs. Their pitching wasn't good enough to stop the bleeding. That bullpen that you talked about was embarrassing in the playoffs. Right? They were good during the season, but not in the playoffs. Now, I'm not telling you the Phillies are going to win 80 games, but I can assure you that they're probably going to be south of 90 wins than north of 90 wins. With a bad National League East, they only won 90 games. That was beating on the Mets, beating on the Nationals, playing pretty well against the Marlins, who were solid. And that was basically it. Now, you expect a team like the Mets to be better than last year. Now, you could say a little bit better, a lot better. Yeah, I agree, Easy. But again, I think if the Mets were to face the Phillies in that wild card round in 2022, the Mets, who dominated them, I think would have beat them. Right? But you can also easily talk about 2006, 2015, where the Dodgers dominated the Mets in the regular season and the Mets beat them in the playoffs in 06 and 2015. Right? You can look back to any year you want and look at a team that dominated during the season and lost against the same team in the playoffs. It goes by being hot at the right time, right? No, Ricardo, I'm not saying the Phillies offenses are not better than us. That's true. But they're better than us based on power. That's it. That's it. Right? It's mostly power. They rely on a ton of home runs. Again, when they stop hitting home runs, they struggle. Why do you think they only won 90 games last year? They should have been a lot better than that. Because they go through dry spells when they don't hit home runs. They don't win ball games. Go back to their season. Because I focused on the Phillies last year because I think it's a lot of talk about how good they are when their pitching staff wasn't that good. Their rotation wasn't that good. Their offense, when they lost ball games, they scored less than 3 runs per game. When they won ball games, they scored more than 5 runs per ball game. Well, Easy, I agree with that. And that's why I said this core needs to grow a pair. I said this 2 years ago. You can't get knocked in the mouth and then squivel in the corner like a little baby. You can't do that. This is why I talk about the core. And when everybody's like, oh, you can't get rid of Alonso. Oh, you can't get rid of him. Yes, you can. because I've seen a mentally soft Pete Alonso. When he got knocked in the mount, we saw it last year. What happened last year? He hits the home run. He opens his mouth in the dugout against the Braves. And what happens after that? They throw at him. And what else did they do? They dominate him after that. Right? The guy that everybody loves, guy that everybody wants to make the captain, the guy that's supposed to be the leader of the team, came up small when the team needed him most. Right? Where was Pete Alonso in 2022 during that series against the Braves? Right? I'm sorry. You can't lose Marte and say, oh my God, this lineup's in trouble when you got Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, and Lindor. At some point, this core that everybody seems to love needs to grow a pair, because Easy is absolutely right. I've talked about this for years. Well, Easy, there's teams that has the edge on another team, right? Just has their number. The Phillies had the Braves number the last couple of seasons. That happens, right? That always happens. The same way the Mets, had the Phillies number in 2022, right? It happens all the time where a team that you don't think should beat that team just has their number. It is what it is, right? We talk about teams that dominated during the season and lost to the same team in the playoffs. Look at the Padres against the Dodgers. The Dodgers beat them up all season in 2022. Played them in 2022 in the playoffs. They beat them easily. The Diamondbacks, they destroyed the Dodgers in the playoffs. The Dodgers completely destroyed them during the season. So you're going to say the Dodgers are mentally soft, or a team just has your number sometimes, right? It always goes like that, right? The Astros has the Yankees number, right? The Yankees have the Twins number. No matter how many times the Twins can beat the Yankees in a regular season, when they face off in the playoffs, the Yankees always beat them. Yeah, easy. I agree with you. I agree. But that team in 99 and 2000 had balls, but they didn't have enough balls to win, right? Because when Jeter hit that big home run at Shea Stadium, where were the balls then? Right? When Timo Perez didn't run with 2 outs when Todd Zeile hit that ball off the wall in left field, where were the balls? Right? 99, same thing. Right? The Braves dominated the Mets. So, you go back 2006. A lot of games. Aaron Holliman. After the Andy Chavez catch, there should have been no reason. There was no juice left in the Cardinals in 06 after that catch by Chavez. What that Scott Rowland hit. But it didn't matter because there was Yadier Molina. Right? So you could say, oh, they were talented. They have balls. Yeah, absolutely. But when they got that big blow, when they got that uppercut that they didn't see coming, they didn't recover. So you could say that about a lot of teams. The Dodgers, who's been talented for years and years and years. Well, Mike, that's another thing too. We're not talking about John Gibbons enough. John Gibbons is a badass. He is a tough SOB. He played like that. He coached like that. He managed like that. He's going to bring a little bit more toughness to this team. And I think Carlos Mendoza is the same way. You listen to Carlos Mendoza. He's formed. He fit perfectly like a glove to this team so far. Now, again, in-games decision are going to, make a big deal. It's going to be a big deal during the season. But Mendoza seems like he's embracing this. And maybe that has a lot to do with the veteran John Gibbons next to him as the bench coach. But I think what we lacked, right? Buck Showalter in 2022, I think he, I don't think you would consider him a badass, but he was, in his early years. But in his later years, he was more of a, he knew the rules. He outsmarted everybody with the rules and all that stuff. And it kind of, flipped, jumped into the team in 2022. But I never felt like Buck Showalter gave that team that confidence, that edge to the team. As much as I like Buck Showalter, I don't think he gave that edge. Carlos Mendoza seems like he has a little bit of edge to him, no matter if that's just his nature, his personality, or is it John Gibbons, who we know is a badass, who is a hard ass, who doesn't take crap from anybody. Is that what's trickling down to Carlos Mendoza, which is a good thing? Is that going to trickle down to the players? Well, we'll see. Well, yeah, easy. And see, that's the thing that I'm talking about, right? Mike Francesa, and you know what's funny? A couple of weeks ago, I don't remember who it was on WFM, but they talked about that. I think it was Sal Licata with BT, who said what Easy just said, that Francesa says, when you continue to fail and not get over the hump and have choking in 07, not getting close enough in 08, losing the last game, at some point you got to change the core because it gets rotten after a while. No matter what numbers they put up, sometimes a change to that core, you have to change it up a little bit. You got to shake it up because maybe the core is just not good together. And people are like, oh, how can you get rid of Alonso? How can you get rid of this guy? Oh, we should have got rid of this guy. The fact of the matter is, the Alonso years, along with Nimmo, along with McNeil, and along with Lindor, have been losing seasons, have been failed seasons with expectation. It's just that simple. And listen, you can't just look at the numbers and say, how can you lose that guy? How can you replace those numbers? Well, maybe with two players that both might hit 25 home runs, but might fit better with the team. Not saying that it's going to work out better or worse, but you can't keep on rolling the same team out there, the same core, and expect different results. Because these guys have been here long enough where you have an idea of the core that just might be rotten. They might just not be a core that is good enough or work together well enough to be a winning ball club. It's not on the individual player per se. It's just they might not just work together as a core to bring the team to the next level. It's just that simple. It's not hard. Baseball is a lot about chemistry. We talk about this all the time. Chemistry in baseball is important, especially nowadays when everybody is just like, everybody is babied in baseball nowadays. Yeah, easy, right? What happened with the Nationals? They got rid of Bryce Harper, their star player. They won the following year with a lesser player that took his spot in Gerardo Parra, right? They had Rendon, they had Turner, they had a really good rotation in Burns and Scherzer, but it took them to not bring back Bryce Harper for them to win a World Series, to make Juan Soto take that next level. Maybe, and there's been talk about this offseason, that maybe Alonso is holding back Brandon Nimmo. That's been talked about this offseason. That can be a big possibility. How does that make sense? I don't know. But in the spectrum and the chemistry of baseball, it could be just that simple. Not saying that it's the case, but How do you know? It's not like Alonso's only been here 2 years. Nimmo, Alonso, McNeil been around for the majority of this time with this core. Alonso, Lindor the last 3 seasons. At some point, it just is not working. And when there's a chance to change it up, you might have to do it. Because what if the Mets have a losing season once again with this core? Now, individually, the stats look good. But the same core, once again, has a subpar season. What are you just going to do? Bring back Alonso and say, oh, yep, let's bring back that core. It might just be the core that's the issue. No, easy. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people brought that up. And I don't know if it's Nimmo being the leader that maybe he could be, and Alonso is not like directly, but maybe the Alonso presence is not letting Nimmo being that leader he could be. Who knows? But it could be that simple. Sometimes baseball is not rocket science. Sometimes it's just basic math. It sounds silly, but it could be that simple. It could be that change that might make this team glue better, might make the chemistry better. I don't know. It sounds silly, but if I told you Bryce Harper signed with the Phillies and left the Nationals, you would have been like, oh, the Nationals are done. Yet they went out the next year and won the World Series. Because what it was, maybe Bryce Harper was Stipe Juan Soto getting to that next level. Not performance-wise, but maybe that leader. So it's possible. You've seen this all the time. The Braves, right? I mean, they can't get over the hump. They finally win a World Series. They lose their best player in Ronald Acuna. They basically get a whole new outfield at the trade deadline for guys that are not even close as good as Ronald Acuna. They win a World Series. Acuna's been back. They've been better during the season, but they've been putrid in the playoffs. Why is that? With Acuna. And you could probably say the 2022 and 2023 Braves are much more talented than the 2021 Braves. Why did they win the World Series? Soler, Rosario, Duvall. Players that are not even close to Acuna's talent. But they won the World Series despite having Acuna. The 2 seasons with Acuna, after that, they were failed in the playoffs. Couldn't get out of the first round. Acuna, not good in the playoffs. After the Phillies beat him. What happened? Acuna didn't even stay to talk to the media. Walked out. Sometimes it takes a personality to not be around to make the difference of a team. Because you can't tell me the 2021 Braves were more talented than 2022, 2023 Braves, because they weren't even close. But they won the World Series. The Nationals, without Harper, won the World Series. It's crazy to me, but it can be something very simple. It's odd how it works, but it's just that simple. Bravos, what's up, buddy? How you doing? Happy baseball season. Well, Mike, Acuna was held up by Freddie Freeman. Okay, but again, Acuna didn't take his team to the next level. During the season, yes. But you can say Freddie Freeman was the leader that helped them win in 2021. They lost Freeman. They haven't been nowhere near as successful in the playoffs without Freddie Freeman. And Acuna is the guy now. So ever since Acuna was the man, they choked in the playoffs badly. Bravos can attest to this. Bravos, I said that I was talking, I don't know if you heard, but I said this about Acuna, right? Your best player went out with an injury in 2021. They revamped at the trade deadline, got Soler, Rosario, Duvall. Players that are not even close to the level of Acuna, but they won the World Series. Yet they were nowhere near talented as the 2022 and 2023 Braves. No, Bravos, I understand that. Now it was the Soler Rosario showing your pitching, but with Acuna being the man the last 2 seasons, where was he in the playoffs? Right? You can be as good as you want to be and as good as you are during the season, but what matters is the postseason. And they failed and choked in the playoffs badly 2 years in a row. And Acuna is supposedly your best player and your leader. Well, yeah, Bravos, exactly. The Jock Petersons, the Soler. So it was the personality, exactly what I've been talking about with certain teams. Nationals without Harper winning the World Series. Right? And it goes back to the same thing, right? Sometimes it just needs that personality shift, that chemistry shift that can change everything in a ball club. That might bring another guy to the next level. Right? You can say a lot of things. Maybe Acuna being out made Albies a better player, made him step up. You know, little things like that can mean everything. I agree too, Bravos. You know, sometimes you need a little bit of a change. And it might seem like a massive change, but did you ever think Freeman was going to leave the Braves? Did you ever think Swanson was going to leave the Braves? Right? The Braves really didn't even have a shortstop. They had basically a stopgap in Arcia, who played outstanding. Is not a better player than Swanson, but that chemistry worked with the Braves well. It's weird. Yeah, I agree, Bravos. Now, you don't know what Kelenich's going to do because he hasn't proven it in the playoffs. Sale has. So, you know, it's a lot of factors that go into a team. And I'm not saying that is the end-all, be-all. But if you just look at teams that have won, that have lost star players or lost a player to an injury that was a star player, yet still found a way with lesser players to win a championship, you can't really come up with a really good reason why. Yet teams that were more talented hasn't performed as well in the postseason as teams that your team that was less talented a couple of years prior. It's very odd. The 2000 Mets weren't more talented than the 99 Mets. The 06 Mets were a hell of a lot more talented than the 2015 Mets. Yet they went further. Makes no sense. Right? The year that the Cardinals won the World Series in 06, they were a wild card team. Barely made the wild card. They beat the Tigers in the World Series. Right? It's not always being the best team, but it's the right mixture of players that can mean all the difference in the world. Why the Diamondbacks beat the Dodgers. Why the Padres beat the Mets. Why the Phillies continue to beat the Braves 2 years in a row in the postseason. The Braves are much more talented than the Phillies, but the Phillies have their number. Sometimes it's just the right chemistry at the right time. Sometimes it's a mental game, right? Same reason why the Astros always beat the Yankees and the Yankees can't beat the Astros in the playoffs. Why the Twins can never beat the Yankees in the playoffs. Why the Red Sox for so many years can never beat the Yankees in the playoffs until they came back from 3-0 down. And then that changed everything. It's amazing what chemistry and a different mixture of players can do. Somebody brought up, I forgot who it was, the Red Sox getting rid of Nimmo Garcia-Parra. Garcia-Parra is one of the better players in Red Sox history. Yet, he leaves. The Red Sox finally beat the Yankees. Finally win a World Series. And then win multiple after that. There's not an analytical scheme to say this is the perfect team to win a World Series. Because the Arizona Diamondbacks weren't the perfect team last year. The Philadelphia Phillies in 2022 weren't the perfect team last year, 2 years ago. The Braves weren't the perfect team in 2021. In 2019, the Nationals sure as hell weren't the perfect team if you put them on a piece of paper and say why they won the World Series. There's factors to why. Well, easy, it would be nice, right? But again, that's why I go back to maybe it's just the core that is just not mixing perfectly. I'm not talking about they're not good people, they're not good personalities, they might be friends, but maybe it's just not working as a core when it relates to a team game. Maybe it's just not enough. The individual stats are fine, but maybe it doesn't work well in a team concept. Maybe changing it up just a little bit can mean everything. Maybe instead of a 45 home run guy and 130 RBIs can split into two players where one guy hits 20 home runs with 70 RBIs and the other guy hits 25 home runs with 70 RBIs. You get two players that are offensively one player of Alonso, but those two players might work better with the new core and the team way. And it might just be better. Not saying that it will, but you don't know until you try. I think what happened with Wright and Reyes in 06, 07, 08 caused the Mets to go into a deep plunder after that. Because you couldn't get rid of the fan favorites. God, no. You can't do that. But maybe that was the Mets' downfall. With guys that were still in their prime, where the team continued to fail with those two great players, maybe trading Reyes was the right move to get back a couple of good pieces. And maybe one of those guys turn out good and you get a couple more players to add. And maybe those players were right, could have made a tremendous difference. You just don't know. The fact of the matter is, if you fall in line and as an organization, as a GM or a president of baseball ops, and you fall for the fanfare rather than finding the right mixture of players to win ball games, then you're doing your job wrong. Because if you just keep Alonso because of the fan pressure, doesn't mean the Mets can't win. But now you're locked into a core of Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, and McNeil. If that core continues to lose year after year, regardless of the players you put around them, who are you blaming? Oh, you're going to start blaming Stearns? He brought back the guy you wanted. Right? You wanted Alonso back. In 2027, when the Mets still haven't won a World Series or make a deep postseason run, it's hard to win a World Series. But, make the playoffs, win a couple of rounds. Maybe people will believe in this core a little bit more. Because right now, if you believe in this core, you're an absolute fool as a Mets fan. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying. Get rid of your emotions towards the player and look at the problem. This core has a loser mentality. Can Mendoza and Gibbons change that? Could David Stearns change that? Who knows? But you can't wait too long and lose the years of Lindor and Nimmo, those prime years, and say, well, it's not their fault. Well, yeah, it was. Because if those are the main guys and you continue to fail year after year after year, and you're the big part of this team, you are the problem. You have to be to blame. Fans of Alonso, people who are crazed with Alonso and Nimmo, and even Lindor for a certain extent. The fact of the matter is that everybody couldn't wait to blame Lindor, right? Oh, it's Lindor's fault. He's not a really good player. Yet you see other guys on the core who had bad months of June or bad months of May and struggled in the core months prior to the deadline. Yet everybody's blaming everything else. They find everybody else to blame, yet not them. Like, I'm not saying Alonso's the problem or Nimmo's the problem, McNeil, Lindor. But they could possibly be. Right? How many years did Alex Rodriguez were the best player on their team? And it took changing up a few things and changing up the core just a little bit. And it makes a lot of difference. And I just went over the Nationals, the Braves, the Phillies. Changing up a little bit could, I'm not saying fix things, but you can't keep on bringing out the same core that continues to lose year after year after year. Even if they're not the main problem. If you're the face of this team, if you're the core of this team, at some point, you got to start blaming them, right? The core four of the Yankees, they get all the credit for the World Series, right? But you don't hear about the Scott Brosiuses, the Tino Martinez, the Paul O'Neills, the David Justices, the Luis Sohos that won them big games in the playoffs, right? Who gets all the credit? Posada, Pettit, Jeter, Williams. Those are the guys that get the most credit for those championships. Even when they weren't even the best players in that year. When it was the Scott Brosiuses of the world. The big hit by Luis Soho. Big hits by O'Neill, Martinez. Guys that weren't through the farm system. That were traded to the Yankees. But yet, that core four gets all the credit. Like they did everything during that dynasty run. You can give people credit when they're winning, but nobody wants to nobody wants to blame the core when things go wrong. You can't have it both ways. You can't have this love affair when you're winning and give them all the credit. But when you're losing and you're failing year after year, that same core, you're just going to put in another pile and blame everybody else. That's not fair to the other team. And the best players on your team get none of the blame. I agree, Explosive. That's why I just brought it up. Right? David Justice, big home run in the World Series. Huge home run. Who knows how that would have turned out if they didn't acquire David Justice at the deadline. Right? The Scott Brosius, who wasn't even a good player when the Yankees got him, turned into a very solid player and a very important player to the dynasty of the Yankees. Tino Martinez, Paul O'Neill, a guy in Paul O'Neill who was a good player but had an attitude issue, comes to the Yankees, was one of their best players. Tino Martinez, traded from Seattle. Not a bad player, solid, not great. Was crucial to a lot of those big home runs that were in the playoffs. It wasn't always the Jeters, Posadas, Pettits, and Williams. But they get all the credit. Who do they honor every year? Is those guys. Andy Pettit wasn't the best player, but he was damn good in the playoffs. But yet, it's other guys that are the reason, a lot of the other guys are the reason why that core four of the Yankees get all the credit in the world. El Duque, great example. It goes back to so many different ways that the core gets the credit. So who do you think they were going to blame if the Yankees never had that dynasty? You think they were going to blame the Jeters, the Darlin of the Yankees, the Williams, the Posadas, the Pettits? No. They would have blamed Tino, O'Neill, El Duque. They would have blamed all those guys. Scott Brocious. They would have blamed all those guys, but not the core. Right? Right now with the Yankees, the Aaron Judge Yankees. The Yankees never won a World Series in Aaron Judge's career. And I'm not talking about when he's 37 years old and the team around him wins finally and he gets a championship like A-Rod, even though A-Rod was very good in 09. Right? If Aaron Judge never wins a World Series with the Yankees, ends his career not a champion with the Yankees, but had great seasons, is everybody just going to blame everybody else? Probably. You know why? Because that's what people do. Don't blame the guy everybody likes. Blame everybody else. It was Aaron Boone's fault. It was Stanton's fault. Shoot, it's Juan Soto's fault. Let's not blame everybody else. Let's not blame Judge. No. Can't do that. Jersey sales. Kids love him. Same thing with Alonso. Same thing. Yeah. They almost fired Joe Torre prior to the 96 championship. That season. They were hanging on by dear life. Got really hot late in the year and took that to a World Series championship. You know, Clueless Joe was the headline on the newspaper when the Yankees hired Joe Torre. Now, he's lauded as a great manager, Yankee legend. It's amazing what some little things can do. Was Joe Torre a bad manager? Or was it he had a great team? He had the right guys. Because you put Tino Martinez on, I don't know, put him on a bad team or an okay team. Is he going to make a difference? No. We talk about this all the time. Derek Jeter was never the best player in baseball. You put him on the Cubs, he ain't winning anything. Would he be as great as he was? No. Would he be a Hall of Famer? Absolutely not. Because you know why? The Cubs probably would have never made the playoffs that many times and never got that opportunity to be one of the best players ever in playoff history. Derek Jeter's in the Hall of Fame because of his outstanding performances in the playoffs and World Series. If Derek Jeter was a regular shortstop, putting up the numbers he did as a Yankee, but did it with the Cardinals or did it with the Giants or the Padres, right? He would never been seen as a player he is now. The legend. You still see number 2 jerseys in Yankee Stadium. Same way you see David Wright's number 5s. It's just how it goes. The fact of the matter is, sometimes the right mixture of players might not be the best team. Might not even be the best core that you had. But it was the right mixture of players that can change everything. It might take that one different guy in your core to make all the difference in the world. Maybe that guy that you replaced that everybody loved might not have the individual talent like the guy you replaced, but might bring that extra edge that this team needs. That might put up pretty good numbers, but brings that edge to the team that needs it. Can make all the difference in the world. And I think that could mean it all. Could mean everything. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. For all we know, this Mets core can take us to the top. Who knows? Now, maybe they need everything to go right for them to do that. They can't have anything go wrong around them where they fail. It's possible. But remember, the way you might see it, way it might work, like how can you get rid of Alonso? How can you replace that with production? Simple. You might not have to. You might need a solid player that might do certain things that Alonso doesn't do in a team concept that might help this team be better. It's possible. It's really possible. Not saying that it's a complete guarantee, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. Right? I mean, the Mets had Wilmer Flores, Ruben Tejada, and Lucas Duda at short, second, and first. What? And they made the World Series. Weird. What? That's how it is. It worked. How? I don't know. It took Cespedes outside of the organization to come in and change the whole dynamic of this team. All of a sudden, Wilmer Flores got better. Lucas Duda got better. Like, it's crazy, but that's how it happened. Well, Christian, I mean, not saying that Alonso can't, but he is the one guy that is available to a change to this core, to this organization. Now, I don't think it's going to happen because I think the fan pressure and the media pressure is going to make the Mets fold. And you hope David Stearns doesn't fall to the pressure, but it might be out of his hands. It might be Cohen who steps in and says, listen, we can't lose Alonso. It's possible. All right, so let's finish it up here, guys. Diaz making his first outing of the spring Monday, 6 p.m. against the Marlins. 2.5 weeks before opening day. All signs are looking good. He looks healthy. He's been dominant in his backfield batting practice, live action practices that he's been having. Been striking out the world. His slider is sharp. His fastball, 96, 97. He's going to work his way up strength-wise. See how that goes. And the last topic. Nimmo out of the Leo spot. That's been a topic the last couple of days. Chris from, we all know Chris, CP, right? If you haven't subscribed to his channel, he talked about this when we did our roster projections earlier and a couple of weeks ago. He says he would move Nimmo from the leadoff spot. I didn't necessarily agree. Thinking who would be the leadoff guy. Some people say McNeil. Some people say Marte. Blah, blah, blah. I think the reason the Mets would move Marte is not because the on base isn't there. It is. Not because Nimmo can work a count. He can. I think because the way baseball is going, and they want a guy at the top of the order that has the ability to steal bases, I think is what the Mets are looking at. Now, Mendoza came out and says, as long as everybody's healthy, Nimmo's going to be the leadoff guy. Where that speculation came, I don't know if it was through the media, through the reporters who had nothing else to talk about and wanted to start up something. But it is interesting to talk about. Where would you put Nimmo if Nimmo's not leading off? Would you put Marte to lead off? Would you put McNeil to lead off? Would Nimmo bat behind Alonso? A lot of things can go, but it brewed up a conversation on X, on social media, about Nimmo possibly moving from the leadoff spot. Now, it's funny how Mendoza came out and said, if everybody's healthy, that's not happening. Makes me think that this was media-driven, and the reporters brought this up as something to talk about when spring training is going on, there's not much to talk about unless there's an injury. So Mendoza's comments tells me that this was media driven. Some reporter brought it up, and it caused all types of controversy and conversation, which I guess is good. But at the end of the day, it's looking like Nimmo will remain in the leadoff spot for now, which I'm okay with. And we'll go with that normal 1, 2, 3, 4 that I like. That was very successful when healthy. Nimmo, Marte, Lindor, Alonso. Now, who will be fifth? I would start Alvarez the first series of the year batting fifth. I think he has that swagger, that confidence that I don't think he's going to hide from. I think he loves the spotlight. I don't think he's going to be afraid of that moment. And then McNeil 6th. Vientos 7th. Beatty 8th and Bader 9th. I think that's where I would go. We'll see how the 6 through 9, or at least 5 through 9, is going to get worked out, because I don't think you can put anybody else in that 5 spot that's left in the lineup behind Pete Alonso. I think Alvarez got that confidence and that swagger, who is not going to shy away from that spotlight when they walk Alonso to get to Alvarez. I don't think he's going to shy away from that. I think he's going to thrive in that moment. So with that said, guys, Monday, Diaz, first outing of spring against the Marlins. I will be going live tomorrow for that game, so we can watch Diaz pitch. I'm assuming he's going to pitch. I think they said 20 pitches, his first outing. Whenever that might be, that might not be the 9th inning, it might be the 5th inning. So I'll go live tomorrow's game. The game's at 6 o'clock against the Marlins. So you're going to see Diaz tomorrow, which is nice to see. Hauser looked good today. 3 1/3, 5 strikeouts, no runs, no walks. Fujinami struggled. Vientos showed some power. With that said, guys, everybody have a good night. It was an excellent conversation today. Everybody had some good takes in the comments today. I do appreciate everybody tuning in to another Mets Spring Training Talk Live. Couple more weeks until spring training, guys. 2.5 to be exact. March 28th against the Brewers. 110 Citi Field. Be there. Be square. I know that's lame, but who cares? With that said, everybody have a good night. As always, Met fans, let's go Mets. I'll see you next time, guys. Have a great night.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets